For 5 years, my parents introduced me as their struggling freelancer daughter while worshiping my corporate climbing brother. I swallowed their pity and smiled. But the night we met his high-powered fiancée, the condescending sneers stopped abruptly. Because she didn't look at me with pity. She looked at me with pure, unadulterated awe. If you want to understand the hierarchy of the Harrington family, you only need to look at the seating arrangement in my parents' formal dining room in Westchester, New York. At the head of the mahogany table sat my father, Richard, a retired hedge fund manager whose love language was exclusively spoken in tax brackets and stock yields. To his right was my mother, Sylvia, a woman who treated zip codes as personality traits and considered anything less than an Ivy League degree a personal moral failing. To his left sat my older brother, Derek. Derek was the golden boy. A vice president at a mid-tier wealth management firm by 32, he wore tailored Tom Ford suits, leased a new Porsche 911 every 2 years, and possessed a jawline that convinced my parents he was destined to be a master of the universe. And then there was me, Lily, the disappointment seated at the far end of the table next to the drafty window. 4 years ago, I committed the ultimate Harrington sin. I dropped out of my MBA program at Columbia University. At the time, I tried to explain to my father that the traditional corporate ladder felt like a cage. I had an idea, a complex algorithm designed to optimize B2B supply chain logistics for mid-market manufacturing. I just needed time to build it. I will never forget the look of utter disgust on my father's face. You're throwing away a guaranteed 6-figure starting salary to play on your laptop in a studio apartment? He had roared, his face turning an alarming shade of plum. Don't come crying to me when you're 28 and bankrupt, Lily. I won't bail you out. I didn't cry to him. In fact, I completely stopped talking to them about my professional life. When they asked, I told them I was doing freelance web design and consulting. It was a lie of omission that they eagerly swallowed because it fit perfectly into their narrative of my failure. It allowed them to pity me. It allowed my mother to slip a $50 bill into my coat pocket with a sad, tight-lipped smile when I left their house. It allowed Derek to puff out his chest and offer me entry-level administrative roles at his firm, relishing the power dynamic. I let them believe it. I let them think I was scraping by in my modest apartment in Queens, driving a battered 2014 Honda Civic and clipping coupons. The truth was entirely different. The little project I dropped out to build was now called OmniFlow Logistics. The first 18 months were pure hell-maxed-out credit cards, instant ramen, and panic attacks on the bathroom floor. But then, in year 2, we landed a massive contract with a regional shipping conglomerate. 6 months after that, we secured our Series A funding. Today, OmniFlow had over 200 employees, a sleek headquarters in Manhattan's Flatiron District, and a valuation hovering around $140 million. As the sole founder and majority shareholder, my net worth on paper was staggering. So why didn't I tell my family? Because the Harrington love was transactional. If they knew I had money, more money than Derek would see in 3 lifetimes of pushing mutual funds, their contempt wouldn't turn into genuine respect. It would just mutate into greedy entitlement. They would demand a say in my board. My father would try to manage my wealth. Derek would ask for bridge loans for his lavish lifestyle. Keeping my success a secret was my armor. It gave me peace to build my empire in absolute silence. But that silence was about to be shattered, entirely by accident. It started on a crisp Thursday evening in October. I was sitting at my kitchen island, reviewing our Q3 revenue reports on my iPad, when my phone buzzed. It was Derek. "Lily," he said, skipping any polite greeting. "Mom and Dad are throwing an engagement dinner for me and Madeline next Saturday. Le Bernardin, 8 p.m. Don't be late." I sighed, pinching the bridge of my nose. Derek had been dating Madeline for 6 months. We had never met her, mostly because Derek kept his elite Manhattan life separate from his embarrassing little sister, but I knew of her through my parents' relentless bragging. "Congratulations, Derek. I'll be there," I said evenly. "Listen," he continued, his tone dropping an octave into that patronizing register he reserved just for me. "Madeline is a very serious person. She's brilliant. She's a senior partner at Stone & Croft." I froze. My stylus stopped dead on the iPad screen. Stone & Croft? She works in their venture capital and tech acquisitions division, Derek bragged on, oblivious to the silence on my end of the line. She deals with actual founders and tech giants, Lily, like real money. So please, do me a favor. At dinner, let's keep the talk about your little freelance websites to a minimum. Don't try to pitch her your services. I don't want you embarrassing me or making her uncomfortable. Just nod, smile, and let mom and dad handle the conversation. A slow, creeping sensation of absolute disbelief washed over me. Stone and Croft, I repeated, my voice barely above a whisper. Yes, top tier, Derek said smugly. Just wear something nice, okay? Try not to look like you just rolled out of a coffee shop. See you Saturday. He hung up. I sat there in the quiet of my apartment, staring at the blank wall. For the past 3 weeks, OmniFlow had been fending off aggressive, unsolicited acquisition offers. A major venture capital firm was desperate to buy us out, relentlessly emailing my chief operating officer to set up a meeting. They had recently submitted a preliminary letter of intent, floating a buyout number of $110 million. I had instructed my team to ignore them because I wasn't ready to sell, and certainly not for that low. The name of the firm aggressively trying to buy my company? Stone and Croft. The next morning, I walked into the OmniFlow headquarters. The energy in the office was electric phones ringing, developers huddled over dual monitors, the espresso machine hissing in the background. I bypassed my usual morning small talk and walked straight into the glass-walled office of Owen, my chief operating officer and right-hand man. Owen, I said, shutting the door behind me and dropping my bag on one of the leather guest chairs. Pull up the Stone and Croft file, the acquisition team that's been hounding us. Owen, a sharp-featured guy in his early 40s who had believed in my vision since day one, spun around in his chair. He raised an eyebrow, sensing the urgency in my tone. Did you change your mind about selling? Because they sent another email at 6 a.m. They are frothing at the mouth for a sit-down, Lily. I haven't changed my mind, I said, crossing my arms. I need the name of the lead partner on the file, the one driving the acquisition. Owen clicked his mouse a few times, bringing up the heavily watermarked PDF of their letter of intent. He scanned the bottom of the document. Lead partner on the OmniFlow acquisition is Madeline Hayes. Why? Do you know her? I let out a breath that was half laugh, half sigh, staring out the glass walls at the empire I had built from scratch. I don't. But she's getting married to my brother. Owen's jaw actually dropped. For a moment, the only sound in the office was the faint hum of the air conditioning. You are joking, Derek? The brother who thinks you make WordPress blogs for dog walkers? The very same, I said, a dark smile playing on my lips. Lily, this is insane, Owen said, leaning forward, his eyes alight with the implications. Madeline Hayes is a shark. She is known on Sand Hill Road and Wall Street as a brilliant, cutthroat negotiator. She's built her entire partnership track record on acquiring undervalued tech startups before they go public. She has been trying to figure out who the mystery C. Harrington is behind OmniFlow for a month. We've kept your full name and photos out of the press precisely for privacy, but she's going to find out on Saturday night over Dover sole and caviar. I finished for him. What are you going to do? Owen asked. I looked down at my hands. For years, I had shrunk myself to fit into my family's comfort zone. I had worn oversized, faded sweaters to family dinners. I had bitten my tongue while my father lectured me about fiscal responsibility, knowing full well I had more liquid capital in a single checking account than his entire retirement portfolio. I had let Derek treat me like a charity case. Suddenly, the thought of walking into Le Bernardin, wearing some cheap dress and playing the role of the pathetic little sister while Madeline Hayes sat there as the guest of honor, made my blood boil. I'm going to go to dinner, I said quietly, and I'm going to wear a very nice outfit. Saturday evening arrived with a chill in the New York air. Usually for family dinners, I would take the subway to save face and keep up the facade. Not tonight. I called my private driver, a luxury I indulged in for business but kept strictly hidden from my family. Le Bernardin, please, Marcus, I told him as I slid into the back of the blacked-out Cadillac Escalade. I looked at my reflection in the tinted window. I wasn't playing the struggling freelancer tonight. I wore a tailored, midnight blue Saint Laurent tuxedo blazer, a piece I had bought to celebrate our Series A funding but had never worn in front of my parents. Beneath it, a crisp silk camisole and impeccably cut trousers. On my wrist sat a vintage Cartier tank watch, a gift to myself when we crossed the 100-employee mark. I looked exactly like what I was, a CEO. As the Escalade pulled up to the curb outside the legendary French restaurant, I felt a flutter of nervous adrenaline in my stomach. Not because I was scared of Madeline, but because I knew, once those doors opened, there was no putting the genie back in the bottle. My quiet, peaceful double life was about to detonate. I tipped Marcus, stepped out onto the pavement, and walked through the heavy revolving doors. The maitre d' greeted me immediately. "Good evening, madam. Do you have a reservation?" "I'm joining the Harrington party," I said smoothly. "Ah, yes. Right this way." He led me through the dimly lit, elegant dining room. The low murmur of wealthy patrons and the clinking of fine crystal surrounded me. I spotted them in a semi-private alcove near the back. My father was holding court, an expensive bottle of red wine already breathing on the table. My mother was nodding along, adorned in her pearls. Derek sat beside them, looking exceptionally smug in a charcoal suit. And next to Derek sat Madeline Hayes. She was strikingly beautiful, but not in a soft way. She had sharp, intelligent eyes, sleek blonde hair pulled back into a sophisticated knot, and an undeniable aura of command. Even from 10 feet away, I could tell she was the smartest person at that table, and it wasn't even close. As I approached, Derek caught sight of me. I saw his eyes track over my outfit, the designer cut of my blazer, the obvious quality of the silk, the Cartier watch catching the candlelight. His smug expression faltered for a fraction of a second, replaced by confusion and then irritation. I wasn't following the script. I wasn't looking suitably impoverished. "Well, look who finally decided to join the real world," my father boomed, his voice carrying slightly too far. He didn't even stand up. "Nice of you to dress up for once, Lily. Did you find that at a sample sale?" My mother gave a little tittering laugh. "Hush, Richard. She looks very presentable. Come sit, sweetheart." I ignored the barb, pulling out the chair opposite Madeline. Derek cleared his throat, leaning forward protectively over the table, as if to shield his prize from my mediocrity. "Madeline, darling, this is my little sister, Lily, the one I told you about." The unspoken, the failure hung heavily in the air. Madeline turned her piercing gaze toward me. She offered a polite, practiced smile, the kind reserved for people who hold absolutely no value to her professional or social life. "It's so lovely to finally meet you, Lily," Madeline said, her voice smooth and polished. "Derek has told me so much about you. He says you dabble in website design." I met her eyes dead on, resting my forearms on the white tablecloth. "Something like that," I replied, a slow smile spreading across my face. Madeline blinked. Her practiced smile slipped just a millimeter. She tilted her head, her sharp eyes scanning my face, then dropping to the Cartier watch, then back to my face. I could almost see the gears turning in her brilliant, analytical mind. She was a woman who studied faces, who studied founders, who lived and breathed data. She opened her mouth to speak, but before she could, Derek interrupted, eager to assert his dominance. "Yes, Lily helps local bakeries put their menus online." Derek laughed, taking a sip of his wine. "We're all very proud of her little hobby, even if it doesn't quite pay the bills. But let's talk about you, Madeline. Tell Mom and Dad about the massive acquisition your firm is working on. The tech company? You said the founder was playing hardball?" The trap was set. The fuse was lit. And I sat back, waiting for the explosion. The sommelier approached, seamlessly pouring a 2015 Chateau Margaux into our crystal glasses. Derek raised his, the diamond on Madeline's finger catching the ambient light as she mirrored the gesture. "To us," Derek said, his chest puffed out like a proud peacock. "And to Madeline's upcoming promotion to managing partner." "Hear, hear, my father, Richard," boomed, taking a hearty swallow. "It is deeply refreshing to have another serious professional joining the family. Someone who understands the value of building equity." He didn't look at me, but the implication hit the center of the table with the grace of a lead balloon. My mother, Sylvia, patted Derek's arm. "So, Madeline, darling, Derek tells us you're working on a massive deal. A buyout?" Madeline took a delicate sip of her wine, gracefully dabbing her lips with a linen napkin. Yes, Sylvia. It's actually been consuming my life for the past month. We are trying to acquire a highly disruptive tech firm. They specialize in B2B supply chain logistics. It's a brilliant piece of architecture, really an algorithm that saves mid-market manufacturers roughly 22% on overhead. Fascinating, my father said, leaning in. He loved talking about other people's money. What's the holdup? Price? Partly, Madeline sighed, a glimmer of genuine frustration breaking through her polished veneer. But primarily, it's the founder. They are incredibly elusive. No press, no Forbes profiles, no public appearances. We only know them by a first initial and a last name. The entire company is run through a highly capable executive team, but the founder holds absolute majority equity. I've sent 3 letters of intent, and they won't even grant us a preliminary Zoom meeting. Derek chuckled, slicing into his appetizer. Who turns down a meeting with Stone and Croft? Sounds like an amateur who doesn't know how the big leagues work. What's the company? Omniflow Logistics, Madeline stated. I didn't flinch. I slowly reached for my water glass, taking a calm, measured sip. And the founder? My father asked, buttering a piece of artisan bread. What's the name? Say. Harrington, Madeline said. A beat of silence passed over the table. And then Derek burst out laughing. It was a loud braying sound that caused the couple at the adjacent table to turn and glare. My father joined in, a deep, rumbling chuckle shaking his shoulders. Harrington! Derek gasped, pointing his butter knife at me. Can you imagine, Lily? Maybe it's you. Maybe your little freelance bakery website suddenly pivoted to, what did you call it, Madeline? B2B supply chain algorithms? My mother offered a strained, polite laugh. Oh, Derek, don't tease your sister. It's just a funny coincidence. I'm serious. Derek wiped a tear of mirth from his eye. Lily, imagine if Dad thought you were the one holding out on a massive corporate buyout. She lives in a studio in Queens, Madeline. Drives a car that makes a rattling sound when it hits 40 miles an hour. Madeline didn't laugh. Her smile had completely vanished. Her sharp, analytical eyes darted from Derek's mocking face to my calm, utterly unfazed expression. She looked at the way I was sitting relaxed, back straight, owning my space. She looked at the midnight blue Saint Laurent tailoring. She looked, once again, at the vintage Cartier tank watch on my left wrist, a timepiece that retailed for more than Derek's annual bonus. Then, her eyes flicked back to my face. She remembered the name of my supposed freelance business from Derek's earlier, dismissive introduction. She remembered Derek mentioning I had dropped out of Columbia Business School 4 years ago. She was a woman who made her millions by connecting invisible dots, and right now I could see the neural pathways firing in her brain at light speed. Wait, Madeline whispered, the words slipping out involuntarily. The laughter at the table died down. My father looked at her, confused by the sudden shift in her demeanor. Madeline? Is everything all right? Madeline ignored him. She leaned forward, placing both hands flat on the table, her gaze locked entirely on me. The atmosphere in our little alcove suddenly felt as though the oxygen had been vacuumed out. Columbia, Madeline said, her voice dropping into a register of deadly serious professional inquiry. You dropped out of Columbia MBA program 4 years ago. I did, I replied evenly. Omniflow Logistics was incorporated in Delaware, she continued, her breathing shallow, exactly 46 months ago. 47, actually, I corrected softly. The paperwork cleared in November. Derek looked between the two of us, a patronizing smirk still plastered on his face. Madeline, what are you doing? Don't entertain her. Lily barely knows how to use Excel. Derek, shut up, Madeline snapped. The entire table recoiled. My mother gasped, clutching her pearls in a gesture so stereotypical I almost rolled my eyes. Derek blinked, looking as though he had just been physically struck. Excuse me, he stammered. Madeline didn't even look at the man she was supposed to marry. She was staring at me as if she had just stumbled upon a mythical creature in the middle of a Michelin star restaurant. The patronizing warmth of the future sister-in-law was gone. She was now the apex predator of Sand Hill Road, and she had just realized she was sitting across from the biggest prize of her fiscal year. "You're the founder," Madeline breathed, her voice laced with absolute, unadulterated awe. "You're C. Harrington, you're Omniflow." I held her gaze, a slow, predatory smile finally breaking across my face. "Hello, Madeline," I said. "I hear you've been harassing my COO. If I could have bottled the silence that followed, I could have sold it for $1 billion. My father's face, usually a mask of stoic judgment, slackened into a portrait of profound, slack-jawed stupidity. My mother looked as though she was trying to translate my words from a foreign language. Derek, however, went through the 5 stages of grief in record time. First came the furious denial. "Madeline, this is absurd," Derek scoffed, slamming his hand on the table, rattling the silverware. "She is lying to you. She makes WordPress sites. She borrows money from Mom. Tell her, Mom." "I haven't taken a dime from Mom in 4 years, Derek," I said, my voice cutting through the panic like a scalpel. "I let her slip 50s into my coat pocket because it makes her feel superior, and honestly, it was a cheap price to pay to keep you all from prying into my life." "You are delusional," Derek spat, his face flushing violently red. "Madeline, she is trying to embarrass me. This is exactly why I didn't want to invite her." Madeline slowly turned her head to look at Derek. The expression on her face was one of chilling reevaluation. It was the look of a woman who was realizing that the brilliant wealth manager she was engaged to was, in fact, an oblivious idiot. "Derek," Madeline said, her tone dripping with icy condescension. "Omniflow Logistics recently relocated their headquarters to the Flatiron District. The lease was signed by a corporate proxy, but the guarantor was listed as a private entity. The primary banking institution for their Series A funding was—" She turned back to me, her eyes gleaming. "Silicon Valley Bank, before the restructure, moved to Chase Private." "Correct," I said, picking up my wine glass. "She read that online," Derek practically shouted. "She's scamming you!" I sighed, reached into my blazer pocket, and pulled out my phone. I unlocked it, opened my secure enterprise email client, and slid the phone across the pristine white tablecloth toward Madeline. "Your email from 6 a.m. this morning, I believe," I said. Madeline looked down at the screen. There, glowing in stark black and white, was the confidential, legally binding letter of intent she had drafted herself, addressed to C. Harrington, founder and CEO, Omniflow Logistics, sent to an encrypted internal domain that no one outside my C-suite knew existed. Madeline exhaled a shaky breath. She looked up at me, and the respect in her eyes was so intense it was almost palpable. "It's a pleasure to finally meet you, Lily," she said, extending her hand across the table. I shook it. Her grip was firm. "Likewise, Madeline. Though I wish the circumstances were less theatrical." Wait a minute," my father stammered, finally finding his voice. He grabbed the edge of the table, his knuckles turning white. He looked at Madeline, his brain struggling to compute the data. "Madeline, you said this company. What is it worth?" Madeline didn't take her eyes off me. Stone and Croft authorized me to offer a preliminary buyout of $110 million, cash and stock options. My mother let out a small, strangled squeak and promptly knocked over her water glass. The ice cubes clattered onto the floor, pooling around my father's Italian leather shoes, but nobody moved to clean it up. $110 million, my father repeated, the words tasting like ash in his mouth. He turned to look at me, truly looking at me for the first time in my life. The disappointment, the pity, the condescension it all evaporated, replaced instantly by a ravenous, desperate hunger. The transactional nature of his love snapped into focus. "Lily," my father said, his voice suddenly thick with forced, patriarchal warmth. He actually tried to smile. "My God, why didn't you tell us? This is phenomenal. We need to talk about your wealth management immediately. You can't just leave that kind of capital sitting uninvested. I can make some calls tomorrow. We can set up a family trust. Stop, I said, raising a single finger. The command in my voice was absolute. It was the voice I used to negotiate with ruthless suppliers in Shenzhen, the voice I used to shut down hostile board members. My father's mouth snapped shut. 4 years ago, I said, my voice low and dangerous, you told me that I was throwing my life away. You told me that when I was bankrupt, you would not bail me out. You made it explicitly clear that my failure was my own. I leaned forward, locking eyes with the man who had made me feel small for 3 decades. My success is my own too, Richard. You don't get a seat at the cap table. You don't get to manage my money. You don't even get to know the name of my wealth manager. My father shrank back into his chair, looking suddenly very old and very small. Derek, however, was still drowning in his shattered ego. You're a sociopath, he hissed at me, his fists clenched. You let us believe you were nothing. You lied to us for years. You did this tonight just to humiliate me in front of my fiancée. I didn't invite myself to this dinner, Derek, I reminded him coldly. And I didn't lie. I just let you believe the narrative that made you feel like a big, important man. If you're humiliated, it's because your entire sense of self-worth is built on stepping on my neck. I just finally decided to stand up. I turned my attention back to Madeline. She was watching the family dynamic unfold with the clinical fascination of a scientist observing a lab experiment. Madeline, I said, shifting back into business mode, Stone and Croft is a great firm, but your offer is low, offensively low. Madeline blinked, immediately snapping out of the family drama and back into the boardroom. We felt $110 million was a highly competitive multiple based on your projected Q4 EBITDA, Lily. We bring institutional support that my internal valuation is $140 million, I interrupted smoothly. And frankly, I'm not looking to exit. I'm having too much fun building this. Tell your partners to stop flooding Owen's inbox. If and when I decide to go public or seek an acquisition, I will call you directly. Madeline stared at me, a tight, respectful smile playing on her lips. She recognized the immovable object when she saw it. Understood, Lily. I will formally withdraw the LOI on Monday. I appreciate that, I said. I looked around the table one last time. My mother was weeping silently into her napkin. My father was staring at the tablecloth, stripped of his authority. Derek was glaring at me with a mixture of pure hatred and deep existential terror, realizing that his high-powered fiancé was currently looking at his little sister like she was a god. There was nothing left to say. The cage was open, and I was entirely free. I stood up, buttoning my Saint Laurent blazer. I reached into my pocket, pulled out a sleek, heavy Black American Express Centurion card, and tossed it onto the center of the table. It landed with a definitive thwack next to Derek's untouched appetizer. Dinner is on me, I said, looking down at my brother. Consider it a wedding gift, if you two actually make it to the altar. I turned on my heel and walked out of the alcove. The maitre d' caught my eye as I moved toward the exit, nodding respectfully. As I pushed through the heavy revolving doors of Le Bernardin and stepped out into the crisp, cool New York night, I took a deep breath. The air had never tasted so sweet. Marcus, my driver, Thomas, pulled the Escalade up to the curb immediately. I climbed into the back, the leather seats embracing me. Where to, Miss Harrington? Thomas asked, glancing in the rearview mirror. Take me home, Thomas. I smiled. I have a company to run in the morning. By Monday morning, the atmosphere in the Omniflow Logistics headquarters was humming with its usual synchronized efficiency. I sat in my glass-walled office overlooking the Flatiron District, a steaming cup of black coffee in hand, watching my team work. The adrenaline of Saturday night had faded, replaced by a profound, solid sense of tranquility. The double life was dead. I no longer had to shrink to fit into the Harrington family portrait. At 9:15 a.m., my office door swung open. Owen, my COO, walked in holding a sleek leather folio. He looked slightly bewildered, a rare expression for a man who managed a massive supply chain infrastructure without breaking a sweat. Well, you called it, Owen said, dropping the folio onto my desk. Stone and Croft officially withdrew their letter of intent at 8 a.m. sharp. But that's not the most interesting part of my morning. I raised an eyebrow, taking a sip of my coffee. Oh? I got a personal phone call from Madeline Hayes, Owen continued, leaning against the doorframe. She bypassed the legal team entirely. She wanted to ensure the withdrawal was received, and then she asked if I could pass along a private message to you. A message? She said to tell you, and I quote, "Thank you for the clarity. I prefer my investments and my partnerships to be built on reality. Best of luck with Q4. Owen crossed his arms, studying my face. Lily, what exactly happened at that dinner? I smiled, looking down at the traffic crawling along Fifth Avenue. I think Madeline just did a little due diligence on her personal life. It didn't take long for the shockwaves of that dinner to tear through the Harrington family facade. By Tuesday afternoon, my phone was a graveyard of frantic voicemails and text messages. My father, Richard, was the first to pivot. The man who had mocked my freelance hobby suddenly morphed into a desperately aggressively networking phantom. He sent me 3 lengthy emails outlining lucrative tax shelters and offshore trust structures that he could personally oversee for a nominal family management fee. He even CC'd his old golfing buddies, trying to leverage my company's name to boost his own faded Wall Street relevance. I didn't reply. I simply forwarded the emails to my IT department and had his domain permanently blocked. My mother, Sylvia, tried the emotional route. She left a tearful voicemail on Wednesday, claiming she had always known I was destined for greatness and suggesting we go shopping for new office furniture on Fifth Avenue. She conveniently forgot the 4 years of pitying sighs and $50 bills shoved into my coat pockets. I didn't return her call. I had my assistant send her a gorgeous, overpriced bouquet of white orchids with a card that simply read, "Thinking of you, Lily." It was polite, cold, and final. But the true devastation fell squarely on Derek. On Thursday evening, as I was wrapping up a board meeting, the security desk in the lobby buzzed my direct line. Miss Harrington, the head of security, said, his voice tight. "There is a gentleman down here named Derek. He claims to be your brother. He's causing a bit of a scene and demanding to be led up to the executive floor." I closed my eyes, letting out a slow breath. Don't let him pass the turnstiles. Put him on the phone. There was a brief scuffle on the other end, followed by the sound of heavy, panicked breathing. "Lily!" Derek's voice crackled through the receiver, entirely stripped of its usual smug superiority. He sounded frantic, unhinged. "Lily, you have to talk to her. You have to call Madeline and fix this." "Fix what, Derek?" I asked coldly, leaning back in my ergonomic chair. "She called off the wedding," he shouted, his voice echoing loudly enough that I could hear the lobby echoes through the phone. "She moved out of the penthouse on Sunday. She told me I was an insecure, delusional fraud who couldn't even accurately assess the value of his own family, let alone manage high-net-worth client portfolios. Lily, you ruined my life. My firm's senior partners were banking on the Stone and Croft connection for our next quarter. If she leaves, my promotion is dead." I sat there, listening to the golden boy of the Harrington family absolutely disintegrate. For years, I had thought that this moment, the moment he finally fell from his pedestal, would bring me a rush of vindictive joy. But sitting in my multi-million-dollar office, holding the phone to my ear, I felt absolutely nothing. No anger, no triumph, just a lingering, heavy pity. "I didn't ruin your life, Derek," I said quietly, the absolute calm in my voice silencing his frantic rambling. "You handed Madeline a magnifying glass, and she finally looked at you. I didn't make you belittle me. I didn't force you to lie to her about my success to make yourself look bigger. You built your entire identity on being better than me. Now that the illusion is gone, you have nothing left to stand on. Lily, please." His voice cracked, a pathetic whine replacing the anger. Just tell her we have a good relationship. Tell her I was just protecting you. Please." "Goodbye, Derek," I said softly. "Lily, don't you hang up." I pressed the end call button. I picked up my desk phone and dialed the lobby. "Escort him out of the building. If he returns, call the police." I set the phone down. The office was quiet. The sun was setting over the Hudson River, casting a brilliant, fiery glow across the glass partitions of Omniflow. I stood up, walked over to the window, and looked out at the city skyline. 6 months later, Madeline Hayes quietly left Stone and Croft to launch her own boutique venture capital fund, focusing exclusively on female-founded tech startups. Her first official meeting was a private coffee with me and Tribeca. We didn't talk about Derek. We didn't talk about my parents. We talked about data analytics, market trends, and Series B funding. We spoke as equals. We spoke as founders. I never sat at that mahogany dining table in Westchester again. I didn't need to. I had built my own table, and I was the one deciding who got a seat. They say the best revenge is massive success, but that's not entirely true. The best revenge is the absolute, unshakable peace that comes from walking away. I didn't build my empire to prove my family wrong. I built it to prove myself right. Today, the noise of their judgment is gone, replaced by the quiet, steady hum of the life I built with my own 2 hands.